You're listening to Parasearch Radio with paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web at Parasearch Radio. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the KTPF Reload Show. In case you're wondering what the Reload Show is about, if you haven't heard previous shows, these are the interviews that were conducted by good friends of mine, Steve and Sue Taggart, in the days of the KTPF radio show. Their own radio show ran for just over 4 years, broadcasting every week for over 3 hours. I joined them in the last 18 months of the show's run, but eventually the guys felt they'd just about had enough. It was a monumental effort to keep broadcasting every week for 3 hours. It was a wonderful show. But unfortunately they're no longer involved, and the shows have just sort of sat in the archives, so I thought it would be nice to bring them back to life and bring you the interviews that the guys conducted over those 4 years. They include some of the most interesting people within the world of the paranormal and some not so well known but nevertheless still very interesting. We even have 1 or 2 rather unusual shows, including a live seance and other things along those lines. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show, and this is the KTPF Reload Show. Enjoy.
This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience. They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk Radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show, live from Manchester. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And I'm Andy, over in Essex.
And we are here keeping the paranormal friendly each and every Sunday, so pull up a chair and relax with us while we bring you a show full of the supernatural, the paranormal and other strange phenomena. Right, so what's on tonight's show? Andrew Collins is a renowned researcher and author. As a teenager, he became a UFO investigator, and in 1977 he investigated the first ever missing time abduction case reported in the UK, and that investigation changed his life. He became a journalist with the magazine Strange Phenomena and openly sought the help of psychics in an attempt to better understand the relationship between UFOs, prehistoric sites, Earth energies and the human mind. He wrote The Black Alchemist in 1988, did you say, Andy?
So, yes.
Right, okay.
I was going to.
I don't know why, but it wasn't there. Which is a real encounter of terrifying true events. The nightmare began when Collins and a friend, Bernard G., visited a secluded churchyard on the Sussex Downs of southern East England as part of a psychic quest. They are looking for an ancient Egyptian treasure, a golden staff known as the Stave of Nizar, brought to England at the time of the Crusades. Yet instead of finding a long-lost Egyptian relic, they uncover a stone spearhead inscribed with magical symbols. Through further investigation, they discover it has been concealed as part of a dark occult ritual by a character they dub the Black Alchemist. As a science and history writer, he has authored a variety of books that challenge the way we perceive the past, including his latest book, Gobekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, the Temple of the Watcher, and the Discovery of Eden, which we will also talk about later on tonight. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hello. You all right there, Andrew? Can I call you Andrew so that I don't get you mixed up with Andy?
Yes, of course.
Oh, that'd be great. Well,
Call me what you like.
Okay, as long as it's not late for dinner. Right. First of all, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time for this evening.
It's okay.
Okay. Now, first of all, I need to find out a little bit about yourself. How did you first become involved in the paranormal?
Well, I didn't sort of get involved. I mean, I was interested in it right from a young age.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought all the kids in the street were interested in the paranormal, interested in ghosts, in UFOs, into dreams, astral projection, dream interpretation, and I was getting books out by people like Sigmund Freud and others at the age of about 10 or 11, trying to understand, the mechanics of the universe, basically, and who we were, where we came from, how we connect with everything. And I thought everybody else was interested in this as well. And it wasn't until I got to high school, really, that I realised that I was on my own.
Yeah.
And that, I had one or two close mates that shared these interests. But otherwise, that I was, out there and doing my own thing, and that was that. And then for years, the whole thing was put to one side as I sort of went through adolescence. And it wasn't really until I got to work at the age of 16 that I started to read dozens of pulp paperbacks, mostly on UFOs and ancient astronauts. And this gradually changed into the paranormal and witchcraft and the occult, and I started to investigate the subject alongside my work with UFO cases, which at first I thought was a clear-cut case of alien spacecraft coming down here from another planet and interacting with us and then going back to wherever they came from. But I realised eventually that this wasn't the case at all, and that most of the absolute close encounters, the genuine sightings or experiences, were generally done by people who had psychic abilities and also seemed to have various physiological and psychological traits in common with each other. And also I began to realise that people that experienced UFOs also had a high incidence of poltergeist cases in connection with them. And at the same time, I met for the first time a colleague and friend by the name of Graham Phillips, who was working on the other side. He was working mostly with the Society of Psychical Research, looking into poltergeist cases, and he had become baffled by the fact that many witnesses of poltergeist also would see balls of light both inside their homes and outside in the environment around them. And he wondered what the possible link could be between the two. So we pulled our resources together and came up with something called the Cygenic theory. And this was the fact that there are certain people that are prone to all types of paranormal phenomena, including close encounters with UFOs and the witnessing of balls of light, and that somehow this is to do with their genetic background, their different traits that they share in common with each other, possibly even connected with ancestry, what their roots might be. And this was something we developed and we published originally in a magazine called Strange Phenomena, and this was right at the end of the 1970s. And what this did was to put out the idea that we wanted to work with psychics, and that if they had strange dreams or visions, that they could log them with us, particularly if they were prophetic and related to future events. And we would say, yes, this person, had this dream, and they logged it with us. And this allowed us to build up this link with people that that experience this type of phenomena. But what gradually happened is that we started to see patterns forming, that people would start often having the same type of vision at the same time. I mean, possibly in different parts of the country. And on one particular occasion, people started to say that we at this magazine, Strange Phenomena, had some kind of destiny, and that, it wasn't by chance that we were doing this magazine. And then some people close to us, psychic people close to us, connected with the magazine, started seeing this small green jewel, which we started referring to as the green stone, and felt that this was a historical object connected with, amongst other people, the Knights Templar and the gunpowder plotters, and the Rosicrucians of the early 17th century, and that somehow it had been concealed in the landscape around Worcestershire. I mean, I won't go into how we worked that out, but so we started doing some historical research into the homes of the gunpowder plotters, looking for clues. And we felt we'd found a possible location called the Knight's Pool, which is very near Worcester. And we were just about to leave there, and one of the psychics that was coming up with this information about the green stone, a guy by the name of Alan Beard, rang us up and said, we hadn't spoken to him for a few days, and he said, I think you found the right place, but you're going to find a sword first, and the sword will lead you to this stone. So this was news to us. I mean, some of the clues seemed to relate to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Yeah. But anyway, we went out to this place, and eventually we started to dismantle part of a dry stone walling that was acting as the foundations of a footbridge. And we came across this was right on the edge of the water, and all we could do was just take these blocks of stone and just drop them into the water as we were dismantling virtually this bridge. And we came across this cavity inside which was this short sword that was covered in this type of resin. And we got it back to our home, which at that time was in Wolverhampton, and found that there was an inscription on the blade that read Meonia for Mary. Meonia, for spelled Fore, Mary spelled Marye, which was, very Elizabethan in style. And we didn't really understand that. We thought that the Mary possibly could relate to Mary Queen of Scots, who'd been a bit of a rallying point for the gunpowder plotters before her death in 1587. But anyway, cut a long story short, we continued the quest. And eventually found this green stone inside this brass casket, which was of 17th century origin, not far away from where we'd found the sword. And this really kick-started everything, both for me and for Graham Phillips. We both went on to become historical writers, and much of the work that we do is actually inspired by a lot of what happened as far back as 1979. And even today, all of my books really are inspired by some kind of dream or vision which either myself or one of my colleagues may have experienced. And that drives me to look for new answers, to review our understanding of the past, our origins, basically.
Yeah.
And that's, how I came to be a writer and an author. And obviously since then I've done about 15 books. So that's how it all started.
Right, well, we've got plenty of questions for you, Andrew, so I hope you're okay for time.
There's one that's just popped up from Mossy.
And basically, I just want to ask, you've written books on psychic questions. For those of that don't know about psychic questions, can you tell us what it actually is and how you first discovered the idea?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it really followed on from the story that I've just given you, the finding of the sword and the stone, because for a couple of years we did nothing with the story at all, taking us into the early 1980s. And then finally I did a booklet called The Sword and the Stone, obviously after the objects that were found. And this came out, I think, in 1982 or 3. And then Graham Phillips, writing with another guy called Martin Keatman, wrote their version of the story, which was called The Green Stone. And there was obviously an awful lot of debate within the subject of the paranormal about these stories that we were writing about. And I think that my defence of this subject and the idea that you could use the mind to find hidden artefacts, and that this wasn't something that we made up on the spur of the moment, that this had been going on for hundreds of years in Europe, but also it was found within classical times, sort of heroes having visions of the gods and going to find their armour or their swords, and even within Tibetan Buddhism, the idea that certain types of monks, known as tertons, treasure finders, would have these visions of artefacts, and they would put together a train of Sherpas and animals and things, and they would go off hundreds of miles to a certain spot and know that they would either be able to dig and find an artefact, which they called a terma, which is basically a hidden treasure, or they could actually pull them out of thin air, out of fire, out of water, or even yank their hand into the air and just pull artefacts out of nowhere. And they genuinely believed that they could do this, and there are many, many testimonies, that have come out of Tibet, both anciently and more modern, which seem to suggest that this so-called terma tradition is real. And there are so many parallels between that and what we call psychic questing. The psychic questing is essentially using psychic information towards some kind of goal, whether that be the finding of a hidden artifact, the solving of some kind of historical enigma, or the uncovering perhaps of a landscape mystery, perhaps some sort of landscape geometry, or finding of a previously unknown stone circle or ancient site. And the way that I use it today, which is I work with my psychic friends to investigate the mysteries of the past. They will have visions, dreams that may go back, as far as what they can tell, 30,000 years, possibly 40,000 years, and see activities that were going on in different parts of the world that help us to better understand some of the archaeological evidence. Now, of course, none of this can be actually used as evidence of what the ancients were up to, but for me, it gives me an idea of which direction my investigations should go, what areas of the world I should be looking at, what time periods, what links between different cultures. And although you won't see a lot of that in my books, they're all based on sound historical research. Readers, need to be aware that somewhere in the background was some dream or vision that helped push me in that direction in the first place.
Yeah, okay. Now, on the subject of one of your books, The Black Alchemist, can you briefly outline the story for us?
Well, this began in 1985, and I was working with arguably one of the most talented psychics I've ever had the privilege to know, and his name was Bernard. He lived in Essex, and I met him, I think, in 1983 or 84 originally, and we were both working on the same village, which was Danbury in Essex, a medieval place associated with the family of the St Clairs or the Sinclairs, who were up to their necks in mystical mischief, connected with Rennes le Chateau, connected with Roslin Chapel in Scotland. And we were both investigating that. And one particular day he wrote to me and he said, I had a very strange dream last night about Danbury Church and about a funeral that had gone on there in connection with one of the Sinclair knights. And he outlined this dream, and it was so vivid, with complete with the heraldic devices of some of the figures that were there, that it allowed me to piece together exactly who was buried where in Danbury Church during the 13th century. Okay. And we started working together on a number of what we call psychic quests. And in 1985, he started to pick up information about this Egyptian treasure, which he felt had been brought across to Britain at the time of the Crusades, possibly via France. It had gone to somebody in France, and from France it had come across to Britain, and that it was a staff, a ceremonial staff, possibly with it was either gold or gold covered, and it had a serpent or snake curling round it with its head over the top. I mean, it looked like something, that you might find in Tutankhamun's tomb.
Yeah.
And the feeling was that it did date back to, maybe the age of Tutankhamun or whatever, but it had been confiscated from a Muslim, at the time of the fall of Jerusalem, which was about 1098, if I remember rightly, and had been brought back as bounty, booty, whatever term it is, to this country, and was around somewhere. And he started picking up information about some sites in East Sussex, in particular the area around the Long Man of Wilmington, which is a very famous geoglyph on the landscape there of a figure holding two vertical poles. And we went down to the area, and we were drawn to this small, tiny church at a place called Lullington, where we felt that we were going to get clues relating to this object, which was being referred to as the Stave of Nasir. Nasir was a caliph in Egypt just before the time of the First Crusade, and it would seem that the object had been in his possession, hence its name. And so we were looking for clues there, and Bernard, almost immediately we got there, said, there's something not right about this place. He said, I feel that, in his words, black magic has gone on here. And I thought, well, that's got nothing to do with what we're here for, just ignore it, sort of thing. But he sat down, and as I explored, trying to look for some clue, he kept focusing on a clump of old foundations, just a tiny block of stone in the middle of the churchyard, and felt that drawn towards it, and started scraping around in the soil at the base of it, and found this spearhead made of stone. It was natural, but on it were a large number of occult symbols, which we didn't recognise at that time. And finding this object made him very ill. I mean, we went away from the site we stopped. He was sick. And we stopped off at Wilmington Priory within sight of the Long Man of Wilmington, and I felt that clearly our quest to find the Stave of Nasir was over, and that we couldn't go on. So we went home, and what happened after this was that Bernard started to pick up information about the character, the person that had left this stone spearhead in the churchyard at Lullington. He saw his house, he saw some of the rituals that he was doing, he saw that he was quite clearly into alchemy, and not just any old alchemy that went back to the very foundations of alchemy in Greco-Roman times, probably about 3rd, 4th century AD. And that this guy was dangerous. He was, not only to himself, but that he was messing around with sites and energies that could be dangerous not only for himself but others. And we started to investigate some of these sites and found evidence of activity, but the disturbing fact is that we seemed to be getting closer and closer towards my own, both our own home county of Essex, and they started taking place in Essex. And what became clear is that this person who we started to dub the Black Alchemist was looking for us. He knew that somebody was interfering with his work and was now looking for us, possibly to try and to stop our interference, but also perhaps that he saw us in some way as playing some fatalistic role in his own practice of trying to achieve some kind of warped immortality. And what followed was a series of what I call cat and mouse confrontations, where this guy's trying to get to us, and we're trying to put a stop to his activities, particularly the activities around our own area of mid to southeast Essex. And what coincided with all of this was the hurricane of 1987, and it seemed as if the Black Alchemist was using this as some kind of what we'd call distillation magic. In other words, he was drawing the energies, the power from this terrible natural disaster to utilise in his own warped magical activities. So it just got worse from there, really, and everything that happened is outlined in a book that I wrote following this, more to get the story out into the public's eye, called The Black Alchemist, which started off really as a diary report. But the more I wrote it up, the more stylized it became a book. And I then rewrote the beginning of it again. But it's an absolute 100% accurate account of the events that took place between 1985 and 1988, which is where the book ends. But to be honest, even then it didn't end.
No.
We continued to follow up the activities of the Black Alchemist for at least about 3 years afterwards, and eventually Bernard just said, "I've had enough. I don't care what this person is doing. I do not want to follow up this anymore because it's going to affect me." He said, initially it was okay finding a few artifacts, but, when it's quite clear that the next thing that's happening is the guy's probably going to turn up on your front doorstep. And he had a wife and 2 children. Sadly, he's no longer with us. He died about 5 years ago. But he realised that, we'd gone too far, and that, we leave the matter alone.
Yeah.
Now, the feeling from other psychics is that the Black Alchemist doesn't exist anymore, that he's dead. But the strong feeling is that somebody is continuing with his legacy, possibly people in his family, maybe the next generation, and that myself and my colleague Richard Wald have been down to Sussex within the last couple of years, and material has come out suggesting that things are still going on, and that the whole thing could be triggered off again at any time. So it's still something that's active, but it's something that I wouldn't encourage anybody that thinks they want to go out and try and investigate this to do. I really wouldn't. It is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, by all means, read the story in The Black Alchemist. Obviously, it's out there, it's available, from all the normal sources. And, it's a great story, but it is a dangerous thing. And it didn't just mess up Bernard, but also me.
Yeah.
Because at one particular point, we received, via this letter that was actually left at the site in this black envelope with a whole lot of other weird bits and pieces, what amounted to a death to both myself and Bernard, giving us just 9 nights to live.
God.
And as you can imagine, that next 9 nights was quite a stressful period.
Yeah.
And although I didn't realise it at the time, I suffered massively from stress headaches for several months over this period. And when I looked back to my first diary entry that said, stress headache today, I got that death threat, and I'd never even linked it.
No.
So, in other words, this affected me probably a lot more than I was willing to admit at the time.
Yeah.
And I was looking at it more from a journalistic point of view, because at the time I was working for a newspaper, the Leeds Times in southeast Essex, and I thought, this is a great story, but it was obviously affecting me a lot more than perhaps, as I said, I was prepared to admit at the time.
Yeah. What do you? Sorry, wrong question. Do you think the Black Alchemist worked alone?
Initially, yes.
Right.
But what became clear is that he was working with a female, because the artefacts initially were seemingly left by one person. There were certain symbols, letters on them that were clearly written in a male hand. And then in Danbury Churchyard, just after the hurricane in 1987, we found this dagger, this black ebony dagger with this grinning ape as a handle, stuck into a bloodied heart. And there was writing along the blade of this knife, which was very clearly a different hand, and unanimously everybody that saw it, and this, the actual inscription is included in the Black Alchemist book. It's clearly written in a female writing. It's completely different, and I think at that point we realised that he was working with a woman, right? And that he probably had a small group with him as well, possibly 5 or 6 people. And this worried us slightly, because this wasn't now just one deranged man that we were dealing with. This was a whole group of people, all of them that seemed to have, some kind of grudge now towards Bernard and myself. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to get the book out, because I thought, if I put this out into the public domain, just maybe the whole thing will stop, or that other people will be able to start finding out more information about them, and they'll go underground, and this will be the end of it. Certainly things did die down eventually, but it's one of these things which is still out there. It's still happening. We didn't get any absolute conclusions. I rounded off the story as best as I could in the original version of the Black Alchemist that came out at the end of 1988, and I changed that ending for the new version, a remastered edition of the book that came out earlier on this year. Just because, I think I brought it out too soon. So I rounded it off, better this time. I think it makes for a better read for the readership. But, as I said, 100% accurate as far as all of the diary reports and memories are concerned of exactly what happened at that time. And there were various other people involved, that had experiences, visions, dreams connected with the Black Alchemist that matched exactly what Bernard also saw. So, this isn't just one man, coming out with stuff. There was a number of people involved here.
Okay, well, Steve's got a question for you.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Do you still have the artifact you found?
Yes, I do, yes.
And is there still any energy connected to them?
Not so much now, but, it's like anything. Obviously, objects are charged. And obviously, they were charged at the time of their creation. And they were probably doused in holy water and, things like this at the time. And they lose that charge. But because they've still got magical symbols on them, if you put enough focus on them, if you started to do, meditations and rituals with them, you would charge them up again. And you would, in many ways, open up a portal to the Black Alchemist once more, or whoever is, perpetuating his legacy at least. To be honest, myself and my colleague Richard Wald have actually done this, because when I knew I was going to be rewriting the book, a couple of years ago, we went down to Lullington again, and the Long Man of Wilmington and Wilmington Priory, and we actually took the original shell spearhead with all the mandibles down and put it back in the ground at exact spot that it was found, and I had Richard rediscover it, and I was filming it at the time because I wanted to do a promo video. And by the way, that promo video is done now, and it's linked in theory, I think, to my website andrewcollins.com. If it's not, then I should link it now, but it can be found by just going onto YouTube and just putting Black Alchemist Andrew Collins.
Okay.
And anyway, so, this was just for promotional reasons. But what was so strange is that the day that we were down there, a day which started off in beautiful weather, which is quite clear from the footage that we took, suddenly took a turn. And even by the time that we moved from Lullington to our next port of call, which was Wilmington Church, now it was, force 4 or 5 gales. And by the time we ended the day, the gales were just so violent that we just could hardly stand on our feet. And this was in the middle of summer, around midsummer. And so, and as Richard and I were sitting in a car on the top of the South Downs trying to link with this, Richard started picking up some quite incredible material about the Black Alchemist and what he'd originally been up to at Lullington and at the Lion of Wilmington. And this is stuff which, if we want, is there to be followed up at some point in the future. But all of this is in the book, by the way, the new remastered issue. I mean, I've got like a section right at the end which is called, I can't remember what it's called now. But it's like I've done it as a final chapter, and it's Richard and I going back to the area, and all of everything kicking off again, basically.
Yeah. Did you ever find out what the significance was of the stave of Nizir?
Yes. I mean, in the original book, I don't really come back to it simply because it really sort of paled into insignificance with regard to the whole Black Alchemist story. But what I've done for the new remastered version is to bring in the material that Bernard did pick up after this time and what I actually did to check it out relating to the stave of Nizir. And I mean, this included, for instance, me going to France, a place called, I can't remember at the moment, but this castle somewhere in France, and going into this underground shaft, which possibly had been created by the Nazis in the Second World War, tunnelling underneath this castle, which was actually picked up by Bernard. He'd felt they'd done this tunnelling. I didn't actually confirm it until I got to the spot, and this was many years before the internet. And I was actually going through this tunnel, and it started to collapse. I was sort of walking through it, and stuff started falling from the ceiling. And the sense is that somewhere down the end of this was a fragment of the stave of Nizir, because what Bernard had picked up is that eventually, in about the 14th century, the owners of it at that time, who were I think it was the De Warren family, who were the earls, I think, of Surrey, had the object in a possession, and they cut it up, not knowing its value. They'd actually split it into 4 pieces, which were then, used as sort of what's the right word, collateral or whatever within the family, and that one of the pieces he felt actually ended up in the hands of a French monarch. And he picked up the name of this particular monarch, and I was able to check the listing of sacred relics that was said to have been in the ownership of this king, and one of them was a piece of the rod of Moses. And as there seemed to be some indication that this stave of Nizir was seen by some people as the original rod of Moses, I thought this has to be it. So we did actually find that the stave of Nizir existed, but we never obviously found a piece. One of the pieces was said to eventually have been buried beneath the altar at Wilmington Church, obviously very close to Lullington, where the whole Black Alchemist thing kicked off in 1985. And what Richard and I found out only when we went back down there 2 years ago is that there is supposed to have been a tunnel from that very position to the Wilmington Priory next door. And I reckon there's a good chance that piece of that stave of Nizir is inside that tunnel, even to this day. So, I mean, that's, yeah. So in other words, I updated and put all of this into the new version of the Black Alchemist. It's not totally relevant to the story, but people continually asked me. They said, well, what happened to the Stave of Nazir? You talk about it at the early part of the book and you never return to it. So, I've rectified that now.
Okay.
Could it be that he was actually using the power from the staff to do what he wanted to do?
Yes, yeah.
Because obviously it would have been a powerful object.
There was a reason. There was a reason why we were looking for the Stave of Nazir in the first place, and the psychic information from Bernard had suggested that it wasn't so much the physical object itself; it was some kind of spirit essence, which was serpentine in nature, that was contained within it, that had been passed down almost through some kind of priestly line, right the way from a very early prehistoric period, perhaps even going back to 10,000 to 12,000 BC, relating to this underground structure which Bernard had started picking up existed in the area of the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. Now, followers of Edgar Cayce, the America's sleeping psychic, referred to this as the Hall of Records, some kind of secret chamber or secret caves or something that exists beneath the plateau of Giza. But Bernard and I started referring to them very specifically as the crystal chambers, because we believed that there were certain artifacts that were contained within them, one of which was this quite large crystal that was seen as like a point of first creation, like a Benben stone, an original omphalos or navel stone. And we felt that if we found a piece of the Stave of Nazir, we could take that essence and that would help us to explore what we called the crystal chambers. And so when I actually went to France, because I didn't actually get a piece of it, but I got very close to it, I did a ritual within this collapsing tunnel to try and draw the essence from the fragment into an object which I, brought with me for that purpose, and brought that back. And Bernard and I used this in our exploration of the crystal chambers. But I think what's important here is that some of the listeners might say, well, isn't this all a bit airy-fairy and a bit, fantasy-like, a bit Dungeons and Dragons? Well, I think that what's important to know is that the inspiration that this gave me enabled me to rediscover Giza's lost cave world in 2008. It was a story all the way around the world, CNN, NBC, everything. That my rediscovery with my colleague Nigel Skinner-Simpson of Giza's lost cave system in 2008. So in other words, that's how far you can take psychic information.
Okay.
Yeah. One more quick question before we move on to the other subject. Do you know the name of the Black Alchemist? And if you did, would you use it as there's power in a name?
I don't have his given name, but I do have, and I'm not going to reveal it, but I do have a name that he used, which we've confirmed.
Okay.
And we're following that up, and there was a reason why he used that name. It was because he believed that he was descended from, a particular family who he believed had magical, links with folk magic that went back a very long way, possibly even connections with alchemy, and that he adopted this name for use here and there. But this is work which we can continue to work it on, and may well see the light of day eventually. I really hope it does, because I don't want it to die with me, basically.
Okay. Just before we move on, do you think there's any link between the Black Alchemist and Clapham Woods?
Well, Clapham Woods is a very mysterious place in West Sussex. I mean, most of the Black Alchemist activities was centred around the South Downs or Sussex Downs, around the Long Man of Wilmington. But if you go west from there along the A127, in the area, obviously, where the very tragic plane crash took place at Shoreham within the past few weeks, you eventually come to the area of Clapham. And this is a very mysterious wood, which since the 1970s, and possibly even earlier, has been the centre of a lot of paranormal phenomena. Everything from UFOs to horses being spooked, dogs being spooked, some mysterious deaths of individuals in that area, strange atmospheres, possible occult activity going on there. I mean, all this seems to be, pretty realistic. But at the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, some local investigators began to believe that a group known as the Friends of Hecate were operating out of Clapham Wood. Now, the reason why they believed this was an alleged meeting between one of the investigators and one of the members of this group, actually at a crossroads within the woods, which some people doubt actually took place, but, it's a personal experience that's claimed. And other strange letters that were received by the other researcher, whose name was Toy Newton. And they wrote a book, eventually called The Demonic Connection. And this appeared, I think, in 1987 for the first time. Now, quite separate to this, Bernard, and even before the book was published, started to pick up on this place called Clapham. And he says, I feel that there's a link between the Black Alchemist and this place called Clapham. But his words to me were, get a very bad feeling about this place, leave it alone. It's not directly linked with anything we're doing. I wouldn't rush off because, I don't think it's going to be particularly relevant to what we're doing. But eventually, I did investigate Clapham Wood in connection with the Black Alchemist, and not so much to do with him, but possibly the woman who was associated with him, who we started referring to as the Black Sorceress of Arundel. I mean, we weren't taking the titles very seriously at this point, obviously, BSA. And because we felt that there was a link between her and the town of Arundel, which I still believe today. And we were actually given a name for her, which was Rachel Goodison. This was the name that we were given for his accomplice. And it's a name which doesn't really check out. And no psychic information is ever 100%. So I've never really been able to confirm whether somebody of that name fits the bill. But I do believe that there are links between her and the castle at Arundel, which is something which, for legal reasons, I won't even go any further with. And I do genuinely believe that is real, but that's about as far as we need to go on that matter.
Okay, we have had Charles on the show before, Charles Walker. So we've
of course. Well, I mean, obviously Charles, is the person that claimed the meeting, and I mean, I've met Charles. I've heard his version of the story, and he's believable. But the problem is that he's claiming something so incredible that a lot of people don't believe it, and that scepticism has tainted completely people's views on the so-called Friends of Hecate, to the degree that a lot of people now in the occult world don't believe that they even existed in the first place. Now, I don't know whether they did or they didn't, but what I'm pretty certain of is that something weird was going on at Clapham Woods, and that I do think that the woman associated with the Black Alchemist was visiting that place and doing stuff. Whether it's linked with the Friends of Hecate or not, now looking back in 2015, I don't know.
Okay. Just quickly, Muzzy wants to know, are you doing any talks or lectures anywhere soon? He could listen to you all night.
Well, not on this particular subject, because, I mean, most of my work today, it relates to the ancient mysteries, the origins of civilization, and myself and my colleague Hugh Newman put on an annual conference known as Origins in London. It takes place in November this year, on November the 7th. It's in Mile End, and our keynote speaker is Graham Hancock, whose brand new book, Magicians of the Gods, is published within a week or so. And this is basically rewriting our knowledge relating to the origins of civilization as early as 11,000 BC. And he's a keynote speaker. Tickets are on sale now. Many other speakers, including myself, and many others, including Lynn Picnic and Clive Prince, the authors of the Templar Revelation, which influenced the Da Vinci Code. And anybody that's interested in anything we're talking about here should go on to andrewcollins.com, my website, because it's all up there somewhere.
Now, I want to go over to talk about Gobekli Tepe. As I say, we had quite a few questions for you, Andrew, so I hope you're okay with the timing. What is Gobekli Tepe?
Well, Gobekli Tepe is arguably the most exciting archaeological discovery in the last 20 years, because what you have here is what might be described as monumental architecture, megalithic monumental architecture, consisting of a series of stone circles with T-shaped tops to them, that are carved, that have reliefs on them of animals and humans, and other abstract art, even symbols. What would you call them? Like glyphs and ideograms. Very much like the Mayan, hieroglyph system.
Yeah.
And you have these at this huge enclosure, which dwarfs Stonehenge in size, on this mountaintop in southeast Turkey, discovered as recently as 1994, and the date on this is 9,500 BC. And this is what Graham Hancock, who I was with when he first visited this site just a couple of years ago, describes as the smoking gun of a lost civilization.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was onto this site as early as 2000. I first visited there in 2004, and it followed on from work which I'd detailed in a book called From the Ashes of Angels that came out as early as 1996, where I said that angels, as described under the name Watchers in the Book of Enoch, is actually a memory of this elite group of shamans who occupied the area of southeast Turkey or Anatolia as early as 10,000 BC and kick-started civilization in what was known as the Garden of Eden or the Cradle of Civilization. And that, you would find evidence of this lost culture there. Well, as I was writing these words in 1995, that's when the spade of the archaeologist was hitting the ground at Gobekli Tepe for the first time. And nobody really knew about Gobekli Tepe until about 2000, which is when I first heard about it. There was an article published in a German magazine, and I just thought, oh my God, this is the motherlode. This is what I've been talking about. This is the evidence of this lost civilization in this area. So I was on the case right from the word go, and luckily I was privileged to be out there in 2004 giving a lecture on From the Ashes of Angels, and I said, look, as part of my deal to come out there, I need to see some of these sites. And they said, yeah, no problem. We'll give you a vehicle, we'll give you a driver, we'll give you a translator for a week. So I was able to drive around visiting these places, including Gobekli Tepe, which at the time was still being uncovered. And there was nobody there when we went there. There was nobody even guarding the site. The only people that we saw the whole time we were there was the local farmer and his son, who were the people that had been trying to tell the local museum at Şanlıurfa that there was, pieces of cut and dressed stone with carving on being found, as they were ploughing the local fields, on the edge of this mountain ridge. And nobody had taken any notice until this German archaeologist came along by the name of Professor Klaus Schmidt in 1994, and he recognised the importance of the site and immediately began excavations there the following year. And very gradually, over the next 5-10 years, they uncovered at least part of the site. I mean, still even today, they've only uncovered about a tenth of the whole, site, which is beneath this artificial mound or tepe, hence the term Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah.
And but when I first went there in 2004, I looked at it and I thought, this looks virtually alien. I mean, the style of the stone carvings, the manner that this megalithic architecture was built, just said that the mindset of these people who existed in 9,500 BC is so different to our own that we've almost got to throw everything away and start again.
Okay. What do you think was the main use for Gobekli Tepe? Did people live there? What do you think was the main use for Gobekli Tepe? Did people live there?
Well, it was... Okay, there are two main functions. One is an absolute total interaction with the other world.
Yeah.
I think if you wanted to use two words to describe what it is, that the reader, the listeners might understand, it's almost like a Stargate, if you like.
Right.
There are two huge, great T-shaped pillars, monoliths, in the centre of each of the enclosures that are clearly like gateways, portals. And I think that you stood between those, faced towards the north, where in two of the largest enclosures you face towards this flat-faced stone with a big hole in front of you, like a holed stone, which we refer to as a soul hole. These holes are the holes that shaman would use to access the other world whilst in an altered state of consciousness, perhaps using hallucinogens or some other means of entering a shifted state of reality. And they would project their mind through this and literally go to the stars. They would climb the Milky Way and enter the area of the constellation of Cygnus, the celestial swan, but also the cross, the so-called Northern Cross, which is at the top of something known as the Dark Rift or the Great Rift, which is the split in the Milky Way. And where that split begins is the stars of Cygnus. And this has universally been seen as the point of entry and exit to the sky world for probably at least 17 to 18,000 years. And Gobekli Tepe seems to be focused on that. But that's what you can achieve by being there and being inside these enclosed. But I don't think that necessarily was its primary function. I think that the function was to allow the shaman to enter the other world and then somehow counter the activities of what might be referred to as tricksters, supernatural tricksters, who were seen to be able to tug at what's known as the cosmic tree or the cosmic axis and disturb it in such a way as to cause cataclysms on Earth. Because shortly before Gobekli Tepe was constructed, there'd been a terrible cataclysm in the world, probably caused by a comet impact around 10,900 BC, and that this destabilised everything. I mean, probably as much as 75% of the human population were killed, and it left the whole world in a state of what visionary writer Barbara Han-Clough refers to as catastrophophobia. In other words, the fear that cataclysm is about to occur again. So in other words, every time that a comet appears in the sky, everybody ducks and hides,
Yeah.
And it may well be, and this is what I argue in my latest book, which is called Gobekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, that what Gobekli Tepe was constructed for was to enable the shamans to enter the other world, to deal with the supernatural tricksters that were seen in the form of generally either foxes or wolves, and to deal with them, and so they could come back from their otherworldly journeys and say to the people, yeah, sort out the problem, there's not going to be a cataclysm, you can all sleep tight until the next comet comes along. I think that's exactly what they were constructed for, and some of the relief imagery at Gobekli Tepe clearly suggests that it represents comets, and I think this was what was going on. In other words, our ancestors felt the need to supersize their religious shrines and buildings after this cataclysm, and this is when the first monumental architecture was created, not just in southeast Turkey, but almost certainly in other parts of the world, possibly in Java, Indonesia, this place Gunung Bedang, and possibly even in England at Stonehenge. Most people don't realise that there's evidence of a proto-Stonehenge that goes back to 8,000 BC there. And there are other places around the world that have been put forward as being constructed around the same time frame, everywhere from the Sphinx at Giza by the side of the Great Pyramid to Tiwanaku, the huge complex in Bolivia, have been suggested to having been built in this time frame. And I think that this is when monumental architecture began.
Yeah.
And Gobekli Tepe is your smoking gun. This is your absolute example, because we have carbon-14 dating that cannot be disputed, contextual dating of stone tools that are found at the site that tell us very firmly that the earliest structures there were created around 9 to 9,500 BC. So that's the area where I am at the moment. But, we're still working with the psychics on all of this, you know. I mean, you won't see this in those books.
No.
But, I'm happy to hear from people if they feel they've got a psychic insight into any of these places that we talk about. I want to know. I want to hear from them.
And you do trips over there, don't you? You do.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you want to go to Gobekli Tepe, or you want to go to Egypt next year, or you want to go to northern India, Ladakh, to all the Tibetan monasteries, talk to us on andrewcollins.com. All of these tours will be going up in the next week or so. I mean, some of them are already up there. Come on to us and because all of these are inspired by this psychic word. Every single one of them. I mean, this tour to northern India, to the area of Ladakh, which is in the Kashmir area, known as Little Tibet, where you've got all these proper Tibetan monasteries still operating today. All of this was inspired by psychic visions that I had in 2004, and that inspires me to create tours out to these places to do some live questing whilst we're out there.
Right. Okay. And going back to psychic questing, will you be republishing any of your other books containing psychic questing?
Yes. I mean, I've been rewriting the book The Seventh Sword recently, which is
Are you there? Hello? What happened there? Did we lose you?
We seem to have lost
We
Andrew.
seem to have lost him. Hello? Seem to have lost Andy as well by the looks of it.
Oh, somebody's just gone.
Hold on while we get the call back. Right, okay. Seem to have lost them for a moment. Let's just see whether we can get them back. Are you still there, Andy? No, we've lost Andy as well. I don't know what happened there. Something to do with Skype.
Yes.
How are you there? Hi, we're back. We're just trying to get back to Andy and what's now? I'm just waiting for the Skype to come back. I'm sorry about that. Our internet went down.
Hello. We're back.
All right, okay. Let's see if I can get Andy back.
Hello.
Hello, Andy. Sorry about that.
No problems.
Our internet, BT internet went down for some reason and refreshed itself.
That doesn't surprise. Why does that not surprise me?
We was asking about republishing any of your other books in containing psychic questing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I did that by myself. I think that's what I'm trying to say. But doing it yourself is great.
Yeah.
Because you can master it to your absolute perfection, which is what I did with the remastered version of the Black Alchemist. But having said that, the only way that books sell is through promotion.
Yeah.
Constant promotion. And it's something that, between you and I at the moment, I've got several other projects.
Yeah.
The tours, the conference in November, 2 books I'm trying to do at the moment, a new one and a rewrite of an old book of mine called Gateway to Atlantis. So, if you haven't got the absolute time to promote a book, it's probably best to try and get a publisher to do it.
Yeah.
Because, they can use their gusto to promote the book, and you can leave it in their hands and they'll do all the work. And that's probably what I'm going to do with Seventh Sword, I think.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah. Andrew, going back to Gobekli Tepe, it was obviously used for some sort of religious purposes, whether it be shaman or any other. Was there any has there been any burial grounds found?
Not at Gobekli Tepe, no. The only thing they have found is within... what would happen is that after a certain period of time, maybe let's say 100 years or something, each of the enclosures was, in our terms, decommissioned, and some of the stones were removed, and the whole thing was just covered over. They just filled it in with earth and debris and stone chippings and whatever, and either built another enclosure to the side of it, or eventually, as the mound got bigger and bigger, on top of the earth, and very gradually they formed like this layer cake of structures that were getting smaller and smaller as they were getting younger and younger in age, until you created this artificial mound, which has a depth of about 45 feet. It's about 15 metres, whatever that is in feet. I'm not going to work it out now. No. But anyway, and you've got different layers of these temple structures within them, and the same thing happens in amongst the Maya, various other Mexican or Mesoamerican civilizations. You build on top of other things, and this is what's happened. And you will hear out there people saying that Gobekli Tepe was deliberately buried in some kind of hurry. And that's crap. The mound was created very gradually over a period of 1,500 years, and then eventually, for whatever reason, the people decided that they'd had enough, and they just covered the rest of it over. In other words, whatever was left, and just left and went away. Right. And that's what happened, really. Right. So. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay. I've got plenty of questions for you, but I'm afraid we've run out of time, so we'll have to get you back on again sometime later on in the future. Okay. So if that's okay with you.
Yep. Of course.
Okay. But again, just tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your website and everything.
Well, the site that, has everything is andrewcollins.com. Just type that in, and all my books, tours, loads of articles about Gobekli Tepe, the Great Pyramid, the caves at Giza. They're all there. And if you want any of my books, I sell signed copies of all my books, which you can get via the website. Or if you want to just get an e-book or a straightforward version, just go onto Amazon, and they're there basically all the time.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Andrew, for giving us your time. It's been brilliant talking to you. Very fascinating subjects, and I wish you all the best of luck with all your adventures. And as I say, I'll be glad to get you back on the show again sometime and talk more about this.
That'll be my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
No problem, Andrew. I hope your cold gets better soon.
Thank you. I'm drinking Drambuie. That generally does the trick.
I'll speak to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, all the best.
Bye-bye.
See you, Andy.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Cheers, mate. See you.
Well, that brings us to the end of the show this evening, I'm afraid.
And if we're a bit early, we do apologise, but me and Sue have to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
And off and out again.
Yes, so we've come back to do the show and we're off again in the morning. So thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. And it's good night from me.
And
Andy, have a good week.
And it's good night from her.
I shall see you guys next week.
Yes. And until then, all that's left to say is keep the
paranormal
paranormal
friendly. Good night, guys.
This is where it's at.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.